Nocturnal Innocence by R.G.ROY. Copyright 2019. All rights reserved. Chapter 1. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the streets still shimmered, slick with cold puddles, oil slicks swirling like bruises under the streetlights. The air stank of rust and ozone. Somewhere nearby, a street lamp buzzed with a dying filament, flickering like a tired heartbeat. Ash crouched behind a dented dumpster, behind the charred husk of a church. The last place he'd seen his mother alive. Smoke still clung to the scorched stone. The windows were shattered. What was left of the steeple leaned like a snapped spine against the sky. His hoodie, 3 sizes too big, sleeves chewed and filthy, clung to his skin, soaked through with rain, ash and sweat. And beneath that, something else. The scent of blood and fur, of wildness that hadn't fully left. His claws hadn't gone all the way back yet. His bones ached from the half-change. The itch was still under his skin, crawling like ants across his spine. He hadn't cried, not once. Not when the silver rounds hit his mother before she could even scream. Not when her body hit the dirt, still halfway between woman and wolf. Not even when they lit her up like garbage and didn't wait to see if the wind carried her howl away. Ash wasn't going to cry. Not for them, not for her. He pressed his back to the cold brick wall, forcing the trembling in his arms to stop. Then, he caught a scent, not just the sour rot of the alley, not the fire-warped wood. Blood, old blood, sweet and metallic and wrong. He looked up sharply, muscles coiling tight, and there, on the far side of the ruined lot, a boy stepped into the dark. Small, thin, shaking beneath a long soaked cloak that trailed behind him like a funeral flag. His skin was bone white. Bare feet slapped against the asphalt as he walked, leaving wet prints behind him. Black curls hung across his face, plastered down by rain. His lips were pale and parted, just enough to see the little fangs inside, still coming in, still a kid, still a vampire. Ash tensed, teeth gritting. He didn't move, not yet, but his eyes narrowed and his hands curled into fists on the concrete. The boy saw him, froze. His eyes were huge and dark, sunken with hunger and something older. He looked scared, but not the kind that runs, the kind that's been running too long to bother anymore. "I'm not here to bite you," the boy said, voice thin and shaking. I don't do that, not on purpose." Ash didn't answer, just watched him. The boy's voice cracked slightly. I haven't fed since yesterday. I'm not gonna try anything, I promise." Ash hated vampires. He thought he did anyway. But lately, he hated everything, so he wasn't sure it counted. "You'll burn if you stay out when the sun comes," Ash muttered finally. His voice came out flat, like it had been filed down. "I know." The silence between them stretched, dense and wet and cold. A car passed somewhere out on the main road, engine growling low, then faded again, swallowed by the city. Ash stared at the boy. The cloak was too big, probably his father's. The hem was torn. His feet were cut up from walking, dark welts along his heels and toes. He looked like a ghost. "They came this morning," Ash said suddenly. "The men. Silver rounds, burned her before she even changed." The boy flinched. "They got my dad," he whispered. "They staked him, didn't even wait for dawn." His voice dropped lower, said we weren't people. Ash turned his face away. His hands had started shaking again. He pressed his palms flat to the concrete, letting the cold bite into them. He didn't want to feel anything else. "What's your name?" the boy asked softly. Ash hesitated. "Ash. I'm Lucian." Lucian took a cautious step forward. Then another. The water around his ankles rippled with each move. "I don't have anywhere to go," he said. Ash didn't either. But he shifted aside, scuffing his boot against the ground to clear a dry patch behind the dumpster. He tapped it with one finger. A clawed finger, still not fully retracted. "Stay here," he said. Lucian hesitated, just for a second, then curled up against the brick wall. Cloak pulled tightly around him. He sat like a kid, trying not to cry. Knees to chest, eyes half-lidded with exhaustion. Ash stayed sitting, cross-legged, facing east, waiting for the light. "I'll watch the sun for you," he said, quiet, like a promise. Lucian didn't answer. He was already falling into that dead stillness, the kind only vampires knew. a sleep deeper than humans understood, closer to a trance than rest. Ash kept his eyes on the skyline. His shoulders stayed tense. He didn't know why he was helping. Maybe it was because the vampire was small. Maybe it was because he looked just as broken. Maybe because Ash had never meant to survive alone. The world didn't want either of them. But tonight, they had each other. And maybe that was enough. Chapter 2. Ash didn't sleep. Not really. Not anymore. He hadn't closed his eyes for more than a blink since the night of fire and screaming. Since the red and blue lights lit the trees and his mother's last breath rose like steam in the cold air. He'd watched the light leave her eyes, watched it flicker out like a candle caught in a breeze. Since then, sleep felt like a weakness. He dozed sometimes, blinked too long, but real rest never came. Couldn't. The beast under his skin didn't like silence, didn't like dreams. So he sat in the dark, knees pulled to his chest, claws retracted now, but still aching under the skin. He listened to the city breathe, rats in the gutters, the wind between pipes, a siren in the far-off distance. And beneath it all, that low growl, not in the air, but in his chest, always there. The mist clung to the pavement like sweat, curling around their makeshift shelter in a sunken corner of the underpass. Cold, damp, the kind of morning that made your bones feel thin. Next to him, Lucian slept like the dead, curled up beneath his heavy cloak, arms tucked in, pale lashes still against his cheeks. He barely moved. Is not for the faint puff of condensation at his nostrils, Ash might have thought he'd finally stopped breathing. Ash didn't touch him, didn't dare. A rat skittered nearby. Ash tracked it with his eyes, but didn't move. He wasn't that hungry yet. The horizon began to shift, a grey smear stretching into a weak yellow glow, barely pushing through the haze. Smog-filtered sunlight edged over the city like a stain. Lucian jolted awake with a low animal hiss and yanked the cloak over his face. "Is it up?" he mumbled, muffled under the folds. "Yeah," Ash said. "You're good where you are. Shadows thick enough." Lucian peeked out, squinting, eyes adjusting slowly. He looked smaller somehow, fragile in a way Ash didn't like. "Thanks," he said. Lucian muttered, then softer. "For last night, you didn't have to let me stay." Ash shrugged. "Didn't want to listen to you scream when the sun hit." That got a faint smile, weak but real. Lucian sat up gingerly, stretching, his spine cracked. He winced. "I dreamed about, before," he said. "My dad used to wrap me in a blanket when it got too bright." Ash said nothing. He didn't do before. Instead, he stood, dusted gravel from his jeans, and scanned the street above them. "We need to move," he said. "People start showing up around here after 8. Groundskeeper sometimes sweeps through." Lucian glanced up. "Where to?" Ash hesitated. Truth was, there weren't many options, not ones that didn't reek of risk, but he kept his voice steady. "Downtown, near the tracks. Food trucks dump scraps there, or sometimes old bakery crates." He paused. "You can't eat most of it, but I can." Lucian nodded, drawing the cloak tighter. In the early light, he looked like a ghost in rags, porcelain pale, eyes too big for his thin face. Ash wondered, not for the first time, how he was still alive. "You need blood," he said flatly. Lucian stiffened. "I can wait." "For how long?" "I don't take from people," Lucian said, and his voice had iron in it now. "I won't." Ash raised an eyebrow. "What are you, a vegetarian vampire?" Lucian gave him a look, not amused, not entirely offended. "I take from animals. Rats, sometimes cats, but I don't hurt people." His jaw twitched, and he looked down at his knees. "That's why they—" He stopped. Ash finished for him. "That's why they killed your dad." Lucian nodded once. The silence stretched. It felt heavier than the morning chill, thicker than smog. Ash turned without a word, motioning Lucian forward with a tilt of his head. They walked. They moved like shadows, cutting through alleys, hopping fences, ducking behind dumpsters when cars got too close. Ash led with the tension of a wolf in strange territory, always listening, always ready to bolt or bare teeth. Lucian followed in his wake, never quite beside him. One hand stayed wrapped in the hem of Ash's hoodie, the way little kids hold onto coat sleeves in crowds. Too proud to ask, too scared not to. By mid-morning, they reached the bakery. The back door was cracked open, just enough to let the smell leak out. Yeast, sugar, and something slightly burnt. It made Ash's stomach tighten. "Stay here," he told Lucian. Lucian crouched behind a stack of old milk crates, cloak wrapped tight. Ash slipped through the door like he'd done it 100 times. Lucian waited. Every sound made him flinch. The honk of a horn, a bird landing too close. Even the sun itself felt like a predator, creeping around the corners of the building, trying to find him. He hated daytime. He hated feeling weak. He hated how useless he was outside the dark. Then Ash reappeared, grinning, triumphant, a crumpled white paper bag in hand. "Score," he said. "Day-old rolls. A whole bag." Lucian blinked. "You stole them?" "They were in the trash." Ash grinned wider. "I just rescued them." He plopped the bag down between them and ripped it open. Lucian hesitated, then picked out a roll and sniffed it. His nose wrinkled. "Smells like sadness." Ash barked a laugh, short, surprised. Lucian lit up like someone had flicked a switch inside him. It was the first time either of them had laughed since the world had cracked apart. They sat on the concrete lip of an old loading dock, chewing stale bread, pretending it was breakfast. Neither of them said it out loud, but they were both thinking, this won't last. The sun was rising. The air would get hotter. They'd need shade, water, and quiet. Lucian would need blood. Ash would need to hunt. But for a few stolen minutes, they sat shoulder to shoulder on sun-warmed stone, sharing food neither of them wanted, in a world that hadn't wanted them back. And for just that moment, it felt almost normal. Almost. Chapter 3. By the end of the week, the hunger was louder than their footsteps. Ash could go longer, his body tougher, tempered by muscle and instinct. But Lucian was starting to disappear. His skin had gone waxy pale, like candlelight trying to hold form. His lips were dry, cracking. His voice, when he spoke, rasped like dead leaves. He still smiled, still tried, but each day it dimmed, and every night his small body trembled beneath the threadbare blanket they shared, jolting awake with silent gasps, clutching at his throat like something was inside it, scraping to get out. Ash hated it, hated the helplessness, hated how small Lucian looked when he curled up like a leaf under that stupid black cloak, trying to disappear before his instincts took over and made things worse. They'd made a kind of home in an alley behind a laundromat, tucked between two dumpsters and a rusted-out fire escape, blankets from a donation bin, a broken milk crate for a table, an umbrella with a snapped arm jammed sideways into a cinder block for shade. Ash called it home. Lucian had wrinkled his nose and said, "That's depressing." Ash had shrugged. "Better than coffin." Lucian smiled at that. Still, it was theirs, the first space they'd claimed without someone pushing them out. That afternoon, while Ash was out scavenging, looking for cans to return, food to steal, anyone too distracted to notice a quick hand, Lucian didn't move. He was curled beneath the lopsided umbrella, face half hidden in his cloak. His breaths were slow, ragged. His chest barely moved. Ash dropped the bag of pilfered snacks at their feet. Lucian didn't lift his head. "You need blood," Ash said flatly. Lucian turned his face toward the wall. "Don't want to." Ash sat beside him, arms crossed, jaw tight. He didn't touch him. Couldn't. "You'll die," he muttered. Lucian blinked slowly, eyes sunken but defiant. "So will you, someday." Ash growled softly. "Yeah, but not because I'm trying to make a goddamn statement." Lucian didn't answer. The silence between them crawled under Ash's skin like ants. That night, Ash came back with something bundled in a grocery bag. He dropped it beside Lucian, who flinched at the sound. "I found a possum," Ash said. "Dead, but fresh. You can't be picky." Lucian wrinkled his nose, sat up weakly. "I'm not drinking roadkill." Ash's patience snapped. "Then drink me," he hissed. "Take a little. I'll heal. I can take it." Lucian stared at him in horror. "No, and do something." Ash stood up. voice rising. Because I'm not dragging your dried-up corpse across the pavement when you faint in traffic. Lucian flinched, visibly. His whole body jerked like he'd been struck. Ash froze. His fists unclenched slowly, guilt crawling into his throat. He turned away, muttering, "Whatever. Starve then." He stomped off into the dark. When he came back an hour later, Lucian was asleep, or pretending to be. The grocery bag was empty. The possum was gone. Neither of them said anything. Ash didn't ask. The next day, everything changed. They were cutting through a park just after dusk. The air was sharp with grass and grill smoke. Ash wanted to stay hidden in the brush, but Lucian's legs were shaking again. They had to keep moving, somewhere quiet. Ash was thinking of the old rail yard, cold but private. They were halfway across the field when a woman spotted them. She was unloading groceries from the back seat of her car, parked in a driveway near a crooked little house. She paused, turned and stared at them. Two dirty boys, one limping, one hunched in a hoodie. Stray ghosts drifting through the fading light. "Hey," she said gently. "You boys okay?" Ash froze. Lucian blinked, disoriented and half dreaming from the heat. "We're fine," Ash said quickly, already moving to leave. But the woman didn't press. He just watched them for a moment, then said, "You hungry?" They both stopped. She tilted her head, her expression soft and tired. "Wait here." Ash wanted to run. Every instinct screamed trap or charity with strings. But Lucian tugged his sleeve, just slightly. They waited. A few minutes later, the woman came back with a paper grocery bag, sandwiches, bottled water, and a sealed pack of peanut butter crackers. "Take it," she said, handing it to Lucian like it wasn't anything. Then she glanced toward the house and added, "If you need somewhere to crash tonight, I've got a shed out back. It's clean. You won't be bothered." Lucian looked up at her like she'd stepped out of a storybook. Ash narrowed his eyes. "Why?" She shrugged. "You look like my kids might have, if things had gone different." Ash didn't trust it. He never did. But Lucian clutched the bag like it was holy, turned to Ash and whispered, "Please." So they followed her. The shed was real. It smelled like dust and paint, but it was clean. A cot in the corner, a folded blanket, a battery lantern on a crate. They sat on the cot, unwrapping sandwiches with slow, reverent hands, like the food might vanish if they weren't careful. Lucian stared around the room like he was dreaming with his eyes open. "She didn't even ask who we were," he whispered. Ash replied, "She didn't want to know." Lucian nodded slowly, like that made it better. That night, for the first time in weeks, Lucian slept without shaking. No whimpers, no gasping, just soft, steady breathing. Ash sat awake for a long time, one hand near the door, listening for footsteps, sirens, anything. But there was only wind and Lucian's slow, even breath. Eventually, Ash let himself close his eyes too. He didn't know it yet. Neither of them did. But this would be the last night they'd feel safe. Chapter 4. For a little while, the shed felt like a dream. A fragile, borrowed dream made of splinters, warmth, and mercy. The woman's name was Marcy. She was in her 40s, maybe older, with frizzy hair tied up in a scrunchie and sweatshirts from local radio stations that hadn't broadcast in years. She lived alone in a crooked yellow house on the edge of a commuter rail line, where everything smelled like damp leaves and old paperbacks. She didn't ask questions. Didn't flinch at the sight of two half-wild boys sleeping on a moldy mattress in her garden shed. She just looked at them, took them in like puzzle pieces that almost made sense. And then she brought them food. Not much, a sandwich, a banana, a thermos of lukewarm soup, and always a blanket. Every evening, she left something outside the shed door. Sometimes just a folded t-shirt. Sometimes just a quiet, "You boys okay in there?" Ash never answered. He watched her from the shadows, listened, measured. He didn't trust her, couldn't afford to. But Lucian loved her instantly. She smiled at him like he was real. Not a thing to fix or fear. Just a boy with bruised hands and a fast, too hopeful heart. He spoke to her while Ash listened in silence, chewing his suspicions like gristle. "Why's she helping us?" Lucian asked one morning, perched on an overturned crate, chewing toast like it was treasure. Ash shrugged. "Lonely. Or guilty. People like to feel good about themselves." She could have called someone, Lucian said. But she didn't. Ash didn't reply. Lucian smiled, voice full of crumbs. I don't care why. This is the nicest thing anyone's ever done for me. Ash just looked away. It was the 5th night when it all changed. The rain was coming, big, bruising clouds swallowing the sky, and Marcy stood at the shed door with a flashlight and an umbrella. You can't sleep out here during a lightning storm, she said. Come inside, just for the night. I've got grilled cheese and a dry couch. Lucian was already halfway to the door before Ash could object. His eyes were lit up like he was stepping into a fairy tale. Ash hesitated. Every part of him screamed trap, but he followed. Inside, the house smelled like tomato soup and lemon cleaner, with a hint of lavender near the windows. Lucian practically floated over the carpet, socks slipping on the floor as he took it all in, couch cushions, knickknacks, framed family photos with faces known to history. Ash kept his shoes on. He stood close to the exit. Dinner was simple, but golden. Grilled cheese with crispy corners, soup with cracked pepper. Lucian laughed at the steam and blew on his spoon like it was something magical. Ash barely touched his bowl, eyes scanning every corner of the room for danger, exits, weapons, escape routes. Marcy sat across from them, sipping tea. You boys really don't has anyone? She asked, her voice soft. Not pushy, just sad. Lucian paused, spoon halfway to his mouth. Not anymore, he said quietly. Marcy nodded. Well, you're welcome here. I've got a spare room. It's not much, but it's clean. You can stay, if you want. Ash flinched like she'd struck him. Lucian looked up, hope blooming across his face like sunrise. You serious? He breathed. I wouldn't say it if I wasn't. The next few days blurred into something dangerously close to peace. Marcy took Lucian to a thrift store and bought him socks and a windbreaker with a broken zipper. She showed Ash how to make scrambled eggs in a non-stick pan. He burned them twice, but she just laughed. You'll learn. They watched cartoons on an old tube TV with an antenna wrapped in foil. Lucian sprawled on the carpet, humming along with theme songs. Ash sat with his back against the wall, one foot tucked beneath him, always listening. For a moment, for a breath of time, they felt like kids. Then the moon came, the full moon, the kind that dragged at Ash's bones and scratched at the cage inside his chest. He woke in a cold sweat the night before, nails digging into his palms. His skin ached, his muscles twitched, his jaw throbbed from clenching. He locked himself in the basement. Don't open the door, he told Lucian, panting. No matter what I say, no matter what you hear. Lucian's face was pale, scared, but he nodded. I promise. He sat outside the door all night. He heard the thuds, the snarls, the sound of claws skittering against concrete. He whispered through the crack in the door until his voice was raw. I'm right here. You're not alone. In the morning, Ash emerged barefoot and shaking. His shirt was torn. His eyes wouldn't meet Lucian's. Lucian tried to help him stand. Ash flinched at the touch. It's not your fault, Lucian said softly. Ash didn't answer. But even that pain, real, sharp, impossible, wasn't the one that ended it. It was hunger. Lucian hadn't fed in over 2 weeks. He tried. He really did. He didn't look at Marcy too long. He kept his distance, but her scent, her pulse, her breath. One evening, she leaned down to pick up a dropped sock from the laundry basket. Her wrist passed within inches of Lucian's face. And that was it. The heat of her blood, the warmth of her skin, hit him like lightning. His vision tunneled, his breath hitched, his lips parted, his fangs dropped. He almost bit her. Ash was there in an instant. He grabbed Lucian by the collar and dragged him into the hallway, away from her, away from the light, away from the temptation. Lucian collapsed against the wall, shaking like a leaf in a thunderstorm. I didn't mean to, he whispered. I didn't want to. I swear I didn't. I know, Ash said, voice low and tight. But we can't stay here. Lucian looked at him, wrecked. Not even here, he whispered. Even when she's kind? Even when it's safe? Ash didn't answer. He didn't need to. Lucian's shoulders sank. His eyes fell. He already knew. Chapter 5. Ash woke to silence, not the kind that came when a house finally settled or when the wind died down. This was wrong silence, thick, pressurized, the kind that clung to your skin and whispered in your ear that something was off. No pipes rattling, no fridge hum, no soft snore from the couch where Lucian had been curled. Ash sat up slowly from his spot on the living room floor. The blanket tangled around his legs. His chest felt tight. Lucian was gone. Ash's heart lurched. He was on his feet in seconds, moving like a shadow, quick, silent, head low. His bare feet touched cold linoleum as he crept down the hallway. And then, scent. Sharp, warm, copper-sweet. Blood. The hairs on Ash's arms rose. He followed it on instinct. The bathroom door was open just a sliver. A pale light spilled through the crack, flickering faintly. Ash pushed it open. Lucian was inside, crouched, still, frozen in a moment that had already gone too far. Marcy slumped against the edge of the bathtub, her eyes half-lidded, lips parted like she might still say something. Her neck was torn open, neat, almost surgical. Blood had run down her blouse, pooled along the tile, soaked into a hand towel she'd probably left on the floor the night before. Ash turned his face away, bile rising. Lucian knelt over her, his hands stained red, his mouth wet, his chin dripping. His pupils were huge. He didn't seem to see Ash. Didn't seem to see anything at all. A trance. Lucian. Ash's voice was sharp, clipped, cutting through the quiet like a blade. No reaction. Ash stepped forward and grabbed the boy by the collar, yanking him back. Lucian hissed, reflexive, a blur of fang and fury, eyes wide with inhuman gleam. But then he saw, his whole body deflated. The hunger dropped from his face like a mask. His hands hovered, useless and trembling, over Marcy's still frame. No, Lucian whispered, no. No, I wasn't. His voice broke into fragments. You were, Ash said. His own voice was dry, not angry, just empty. Lucian stared at his hands like they belonged to someone else. She was kind to us, he said, shaking. She gave us food. She gave us blankets. She made me tea when I was cold. Ash didn't answer. He looked at Marcy. She'd been soft-spoken, kind. She hummed when she cooked and told them about her grandkids. She let them stay in the back room without asking too many questions. She hadn't deserved this. That didn't matter, Ash said at last. Lucian curled in on himself, sobbing without tears. Ash reached down and hauled him up. We have to go. I didn't mean to. I know, Ash said, but we still have to go. They ran, out the back door, over the chain-link fence, through the neighbor's yard, down into the drainage ditch, then into the tunnels. The old storm drains beneath the city were barely wide enough for them to move side by side. Ash led. Lucian stumbled. He was vibrating with energy. The blood had fed him. He was stronger now, but broken too. Shaken like something sacred had shattered inside him. They didn't speak until they were deep beneath the surface, where the air was thick with mildew and rust and time. Lucian collapsed against the damp wall. His hoodie stuck to him. His hands wouldn't stop twitching. I killed her, he said. Ash stood a few feet away, staring into the dark. I should have made you leave sooner. Lucian shook his head. No, I felt safe. I felt okay. I wasn't hungry. Not really. Not like before. And still, his voice cracked. I woke up, and I was there. I didn't even think. I just fed. Ash finally turned to look at him. His face was calm, but his eyes were wreckage. She was the last good thing, he breathed. Lucian nodded, curling tighter into himself. He didn't cry. There were no tears left in him. I think I'm a monster, he whispered. Yeah, Ash said. So am I. Lucian looked at him then, really looked. His face wasn't asking for forgiveness, just truth, an anchor. So what do we do? Ash sat beside him, shoulder brushing shoulder. The concrete was freezing. The dark pressed close. He didn't hesitate. We stop pretending we're not. Chapter 6. It took 3 days before anyone noticed them. 3 days of hiding behind a dumpster outside a gas station, living off stale chips and warm soda. Lucian was burning up under the morning sun, skin graying, eyes dull, body wrapped in 2 hoodies and a stolen curtain. Ash held him close, crouched low, a growl building in his throat whenever someone passed too near. When the cop finally found them, Ash didn't move at first. Lucian whimpered softly. Ash bared his teeth. They were cuffed without questions, dragged into the back of a patrol car. No one asked where their parents were. No one noticed the strange pallor of Lucian's skin, the feral light in Ash's eyes. They were just 2 more broken kids on the street. The place they were dumped was called Hollow Pines Youth House. It was neither hollow nor a house, just a repurposed gymnasium with fading murals of smiling children and a clock that always ticked too loud. Cots lined the floor, spaced too close. Lockers squealed open and shut. Cameras tracked every angle. The staff wore tired smiles that didn't reach their eyes. They had clipboards, buzzwords, rules. Ash hated it immediately. But Lucian bloomed. He made a friend on the second day. A wiry girl with pink hair, chipped nail polish, and a silver nose ring shaped like a bat. Her name was Kenzie. She called Lucian Drac and made him laugh so hard he forgot to pretend he was normal. She gave him half a granola bar and taught him card tricks with bent playing cards. They whispered until lights out, giggling beneath a blanket fortress. Ash kept watch. Always watch. He didn't trust it. He didn't trust her, or the staff, or the creaking pipes that smelled faintly of bleach and rot. But most of all, he didn't trust the beast that stirred in his chest, because the moon was coming, and with it, hunger. It started small, the scent of unwashed bodies, hormones, stress, adrenaline. It filled the air, saturated the walls. Ash couldn't breathe without tasting it. He paced the perimeter of the cot room at night, fists clenched, nails digging into his palms. Lucian watched him from his bunk, whispering, "You okay?" Ash would nod, jaw tight, eyes yellow at the edges. He wasn't okay. He was cracking. The breaking point came in the lunch line. A boy, bigger, smug, shoved Lucian with his tray. "Get out of the way, rat face." Lucian flinched. Ash didn't. He moved faster than he should have, faster than any human boy could. In an instant, the kid was slammed against the wall, tray clattering to the floor, blood blooming on his lip. Ash's grip was iron, too strong, too fast. The boy's arms snapped like kindling. It took 2 staff to pull him off. The cameras caught everything. The footage leaked. It went viral for exactly 3 hours, until it disappeared. Ash could smell the cover-up, the metallic tang of silvered lies. They were both placed in observation. Separate rooms, locked doors, white walls that hummed with fluorescent menace. Lucian cried. Ash didn't. He punched the wall until his knuckles split open. He didn't heal fast enough. When they were finally reunited, it was different. Lucian had gone quiet again. His cheeks were hollow. He was pale, too pale. The hunger had returned. "You said we'd be better," Lucian whispered that night, curled into the corner of their bunk. Ash looked at the ceiling. "We are." "No, we're not," Lucian said. "We're just hungry." Ash turned to face him. "You didn't hurt anyone." Lucian looked away. "Not yet." 3 days later, one of the staff approached Lucian with a smile too calm, too kind. Tall, clean, wore a simple grey button-down with a wooden rosary around his wrist. Brother Marcus. He invited Lucian to talk, said his office was always open, that he could help.
Lucian went. He didn't come back for hours. When he did, he was shaking. Ash grabbed him by the shoulders. "What happened?" Lucian pulled back his sleeve, a bandage, neat, clean, not from an injury. Ash's heart dropped. "Who did this?" Lucian's voice was soft. He knew. Knew what? What I was. Ash stared. Lucian continued. "He let me feed, just a little. Said it was better this way, controlled." Ash felt his pulse drum in his ears. Lucian looked up. "He said he could help us, people like us. But we has to follow his rules." Ash's jaw clenched. "That's not helping, that's control." Lucian didn't respond. His eyes were distant. The air in Hollow Pines changed, still and stretched, like a rubber band pulled taut. Ash stopped sleeping. Lucian started seeing Marcus more often. The others whispered his name, Brother Marcus, with something like reverence. Ash noticed other things too. The smell of sage and sulfur, salt lines under doorways, silver dust in the vents, blood, old blood, in the grout. He listened through walls and heard chanting, dreamed of circles, symbols, shadows. He realized what this place was. Not a shelter, a sanctum, a trap. And he knew, without doubt, they'd have to run, again, soon. Chapter 7. The nights grew heavier. Ash lay awake on the thin cot, listening. The wind outside moaned against the cracked window panes, but it was the inside sounds that chilled him. Low murmurs, chanting, a rhythmic hum that seemed to pulse beneath the floorboards. And always, always that faint scent of smoke and herbs curling beneath the door like a ghost's breath. Something wrong was happening in the basement. He knew it. Lucian knew it too. Ash had seen the change in him. A light behind his eyes was dimmer. His smile was brittle, strained. He flinched at sudden sounds now. And sometimes, when he spoke, it was in tones that weren't quite his own, soft and distant, like he was reciting something remembered, not lived. One night, Ash couldn't take it anymore. He waited until the clock in the hallway ticked past midnight. Lucian slipped from bed like a shadow, silent and smooth. Ash followed, barefoot and cautious, down the long corridor, past the empty rec room, past the boarded-up office, to the heavy door that led to the basement. Lucian didn't knock. He opened it and disappeared into the dark. Ash crept to the top of the stairs, held his breath, listened, chanting, low and steady, voices, youthful voices, joining in unison, like a lullaby twisted sideways. He descended, one step, then another. The basement was lit only by candles, dozens of them, arranged in a perfect circle on the stone floor. The flames flickered, casting wild shadows on the cracked concrete walls. At the center stood Brother Marcus. He wore long, layered robes, dark crimson, embroidered with silver threads that shimmered like veins. Around him, kneeling, were the other children, Lucian among them, eyes wide, expression blank. A trickle of blood ran from his nose, unnoticed. Ash's stomach turned to ice. He stepped back. This wasn't a shelter. This was a ritual. Marcus wasn't guiding them. He was feeding on them, drawing out what made them different, what made them monstrous. Their pain, their power, their blood. Ash turned to run, but someone was already behind him. Marcus, standing perfectly still, calm, like he'd been waiting. "I know what you are," he whispered. His eyes gleamed like wet stone. "Ash, lycanth, the wolf beneath the skin, the rage you carry. It's beautiful." Ash's breath came fast, every muscle primed. The wolf inside stirred, growling low. "You don't understand," Ash said. "You're using them." Marcus tilted his head. "We're refining them," he said. "A wild thing is dangerous, but if shaped, guided, it can become divine." Ash bared his teeth. "And what? You think you're the one to do it?" "I don't think," Marcus said. "I know." A sound behind Ash, soft footsteps. Lucian appeared, still pale, still silent, but his eyes were clear again, focused. "Ash," he whispered, "we need to go." Marcus stepped between them. "No one leaves," he said. "Not until the rite is complete." Lucian bared his fangs. Ash's spine cracked as his bones began to shift, the wolf rising. The candles flared, reacting to their power. Shadows snapped, like ropes across the floor. "You'd destroy everything, to escape?" Marcus asked. Ash growled, eyes golden. "We'd destroy you." For a second, everything held still. The flames frozen mid-flicker, the smoke unmoving. Lucian and Ash, shoulder to shoulder, a werewolf and a dampier against the dark. Then the room exploded into motion. But that was the beginning of the fight. Chapter 8. Ash's muscles coiled like springs. Every nerve burned. The wolf inside him snarled, hungry, furious, ready. Lucian's eyes turned to coal, pupils narrowed slits. His lips peeled back to reveal sharp, gleaming fangs. The air buzzed with ancient tension. A candlelight flickered like it feared what came next. Brother Marcus didn't flinch. His cassock hung like a shadow around him, silver-threaded, soaked in rituals older than law. He held a dagger in one hand, etched with runes that pulsed faintly in the dark. "Choose," he whispered. His voice was bitter as moonlit grave soil. "Fight me and die, or join us and serve." Ash didn't hesitate. He charged, a blur of fur and fury. The wolf took over in a blink. Bones cracked, claws tore through skin. His body exploded into motion, raw and wild. Marcus was fast, inhumanly fast. He spun aside, the dagger flashing in a silver arc. It caught Ash across the ribs, slicing clean. Ash roared, not from pain, but rage. Lucian came next, launching from the side like a viper, silent and savage. His teeth aimed for Marcus's throat. Marcus twisted, caught him by the collar, and slashed downward. Steel kissed flesh. Lucian screamed, his arm opened from elbow to wrist. Blood sprayed the wall like ink. He staggered back, hissing, lips curled, eyes burning with something ancient. Ash didn't stop. He circled, feint, lunge, slash. He raked Marcus's arm, drawing a sharp line of red. Marcus cursed and bared his own fangs. He wasn't human. Not anymore. "Lux atramentum," Marcus growled. The air thickened, heavy with power. The candles flared brighter, casting long shadows that danced like demons on the walls. Ash reeled back, claws twitching, his skin crawling with holy fire. The silver cut on his ribs sizzled. Lucian wiped blood from his mouth, ignoring the wound on his arm. Then he darted low, fast, desperate, and bit down on Marcus's leg. Hard, deep. Marcus screamed, buckling. The dagger slashed wildly, catching Ash across the shoulder. Flesh tore like paper. Ash howled, but didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Blood was everywhere, on the floor, in their mouths, in their eyes. Marcus shouted another chant, Latin, harsh and cruel. Then, a flash of white, not candlelight, not fire. Purity, blindness, power. Chapter 9. The rain came down like punishment, hard, cold, relentless. It hammered the windows of hollow pines as Ash and Lucian slipped out a side door, soaked to the bone, bruised and bleeding under their layers. They didn't look back, not at the cracked walls of the shelter, not at the broken promises or the shattered chants that had lived there for a moment, flickering like a match in the dark. The city swallowed them instantly. Alleys like veins, steam rising from grates. Neon signs buzzed above shuttered shops, casting electric halos over puddles slick with oil and broken glass. Sirens howled somewhere far away, constant as hunger, distant as hope. They didn't speak. There was nothing to say. Words felt too small for what they carried. Ash's shoulder throbbed from where one orderly had slammed him into a wall. Lucian limped, his ribs bruised from the struggle in the hallway. But they moved, because if they stopped now, it would all catch up to them. The pain, the loss, the truth. "Where now?" Lucian's voice cracked, barely audible over the storm. Ash looked around, scanning rooftops, street corners, shadows. His jaw clenched, his eyes hard. Anywhere but there. They found it an hour before dawn, an old subway access tunnel, long abandoned. The iron gate had rusted half open, just enough to squeeze through. Inside, the air was thick with dust and old echoes. Graffiti covered the walls like screams frozen in color. Somewhere deeper in the dark, water dripped. Rats scurried, but it was dry, and it was theirs. Lucian sank against the wall, sliding down until he hit the damp floor. His clothes stuck to his skin, cold and clammy. His fingers trembled as he pulled off his wet hoodie. He pressed the heel of his hand against his forehead. "I thought," he began, voice fragile. "Maybe this time. Maybe with Marcy, with the shelter. Maybe we could actually stay, be normal, at least pretend." Ash crouched beside him, the flickering wolf behind his eyes pacing restlessly. Even now, in the dark, he felt it, snarling in his blood, hungry for a fight. But he forced it down, forced himself still. "I wanted that too," he said, after a long silence. Soft, honest. "But we're not normal. We never were." Lucian wiped a tear with the back of his hand, then gave a bitter, broken laugh. "Monsters trying to be kids." Ash didn't argue, just nodded. Yeah, that's what they were, a vampire and a werewolf. Teeth and blood.
fang and claw, but also 2 boys who once believed in home. Lucian turned to look at him. His eyes were tired, but still searching. How do we keep going? Ash didn't answer at first. He stared at the wall opposite, at the mural someone had sprayed years ago, an angel with broken wings, arms open wide, like even the fallen could offer shelter. Then he said, "We keep moving. We keep hiding. We keep hoping. Even when it hurts." Lucian blinked, then smiled faintly. It was crooked, sad, but real. "Then, let's keep fighting." Ash leaned back, letting the cold wall hold him. He didn't smile, but something in him softened, like frost lifting from stone. The city stretched before them, endless, uncaring. But together, soaked and shivering, they lit a tiny spark in the dark. 2 orphans, a lycanth, a dampier, still standing, still surviving, still trying to find a place where monsters could rest. Chapter 10. It started with a garden. Not much of one, just a ragged patch of soil behind a weather-stained community church on the east side of town, where the sidewalk buckled and weeds climbed the fences like they had somewhere to be. Tomatoes clung to spindly vines like stubborn survivors. A faded plastic owl watched over them from a cracked post, and a crooked, hand-painted sign read, "Take what you need, leave what you can." Lucian found it first. Ash had been sleeping beneath the warped remains of a collapsed billboard, curled in his jacket like a buried ember, when Lucian burst in with muddy shoes and breathless wonder. "They have fruit," he said, eyes bright. "Tomatoes, peppers, even strawberries in pots, and no locks, no fences, and—" He paused, still catching his breath. "Nobody yelled at me." Ash followed, as always, cautious, silent, suspicion in every muscle. The church was small, whitewashed walls flaking, a rusted cross drooping sideways on the roof, but it was quiet, peaceful in a way most places never were. An older woman sat on the stoop, knitting something blue and soft. Her grey hair frizzed like smoke around her face. When she looked up, her eyes didn't sharpen. They didn't narrow or scan for danger. They just softened. "You boys hungry?" she asked, as if they were already hers. Lucian nodded instantly. Ash hesitated, weighing the trap he couldn't see. The woman smiled, like she knew. She patted the step beside her. "Name's Mags. You can sit. Or don't, but I'm not calling the cops. I've got better things to do." Lucian sat without another word. Ash stayed standing, arms crossed like armor. Mags handed Lucian a sandwich, peanut butter and banana wrapped in wax paper. Then she held one out to Ash. He took it slowly. It had been a long time since someone gave them food without expecting something in return. They stayed for a week. Mags never asked questions. She let them sleep in the supply room, tucked between crates of hymnals and mothballed coats. She never locked the door. She never looked afraid. Lucian bloomed like something starved for sunlight. He helped Mags in the garden, kneeling in the dirt beside her, asking about soil and watering times like it mattered. He smiled more, laughed at her stories, giggled when she called him Sprout. Ash stayed near the edges, half ghost, half guard dog, but he fixed the broken fence when the wind knocked it loose. He chased off a pair of teens who tried to tip the donation box. He swept the church steps with an old broom, and Mags noticed all of it. "You pretend not to care," she told him one morning, sipping tea. "But I see the way you watch him." Ash didn't reply, but he didn't leave either. For a few brief days, it felt possible. Not quite normal, but warmer, like the world had stopped spinning just long enough to let them catch their breath. But peace is fragile. The full moon came again. Ash didn't make it out in time. He woke beneath the trellis in the back garden. The wooden beams snapped above him went shattered ribs. Blood on his hands, his shirt torn. A raccoon lay torn open nearby, barely recognizable. One of Mags's cats, an orange tabby named Clarence, was missing. Ash staggered into the alley, dizzy and shaking. Lucian found him crouched behind the trash bins, arms around himself like he was trying to hold something terrible inside. "I didn't hurt her," Ash whispered, his voice cracked and raw. "I swear, I didn't touch her." Lucian knelt beside him, cupped his face with dirt-streaked hands. "I know," he said, "I know." But when they returned to the church, Mags was waiting on the stoop. Her eyes weren't angry, just tired.
She handed them a canvas bag with supplies, canned food, socks, matches, bandages. "I don't know what's inside you," she whispered, her knitting in her lap. "But I know when peace is too fragile to last, and I'd rather say goodbye than call the police." Lucian cried. Ash didn't, but something in him folded quietly, like paper in rain. They walked again, always walking, always leaving. But that week stayed with them. The garden, the sandwiches, the way Mags looked at them like they were children, not creatures. It reminded them that even monsters could be loved, could feel warmth, safety, belonging. But love like that was fleeting, a spark in the cold, and not even they could hold it for long. Chapter 11. They met the crew under a crumbling overpass, where the concrete groaned with age, and rusting rebar peeked through cracked walls, like exposed bones. A single battered camp lantern flickered in the dark, casting jittery shadows across ragged faces. The faint thump of a broken speaker spilled lo-fi beats from someone's cracked phone, music that barely filled the chilly night, but filled something inside them anyway. There were 5 of them. Gizzy, a wiry kid with restless fingers and quicksilver eyes. He bragged about hot wiring a Tesla once, though no one was sure if it was true. His grin was sharp, teeth uneven, always ready with a joke or a challenge. June, the quiet one, always clutching a ratty sketchbook. She didn't say much, but her drawings spoke volumes. Dark, jagged birds, twisted cityscapes, escape routes no one else noticed. Tonka, built like a tank, but with a soft heart hidden behind a gruff exterior. His laugh was rare, but when it came, it filled the space like warm sunlight. Leo and Raina, twins with matching scars tracing their jawlines, fierce and inseparable. Their humor was sharp as broken glass, their loyalty fiercer than the winter wind. Lucian and Ash emerged slowly from the shadows, cautious as hunters sizing up their new territory. But the group didn't hesitate. "No one here asks questions," Dizzy said, passing over a dented can of beans with a nod. "You got your ghosts. We got ours. Pull your weight. Don't snitch. You're one of us." Lucian slipped in like he belonged forever. Raina painted his nails black with chipped polish. June showed him how to tag a wall, how to make a mark that screamed, "I'm still here." For the first time in a long time, Lucian laughed, genuinely laughed, when Tonka tried to teach him how to juggle and ended up hitting himself in the face with an apple. Ash hung back, silent and watchful, but even his walls began to crack. One night, Dizzy showed up with a stack of salvaged comics and tossed them into Ash's lap. "You read or just brood?" he teased. Ash didn't answer, but he read every single one. This ragtag group, fierce and broken, was a family. Strange, stitched together from desperation and hope, but real. For the first time in weeks, Lucian's dreams stopped bleeding with hunger. Ash woke without growling. There were bonfires and stupid stories whispered under stars. Duct-tape tents, patching holes in cardboard and tarps. Shared cough syrup for when the sickness came. Rules, too. No fighting, no stealing from each other, and if someone went missing, everyone looked. They weren't safe, not really, but they were seen. Peace, however, was a ticking clock. The timer ran out the night Leo didn't come back. Raina searched the alleys all night, her voice hoarse from calling. Tonka and Dizzy chased whispered leads to a meatpacking plant, the kind of place cops used to dump squatters. Ash and Lucian went too. What they found wasn't cops. It was a man in a black van, silver cuffs gleaming in the moonlight. A hunter. Leo was gone, and the others were next. Ash's hands trembled with rage. He wanted to kill the man right there. Lucian's eyes darkened with a cold hunger, almost ready to rip the hunter apart with his bare hands. But instead, they did the only thing they could. Set fire to the van, ran, dragged the others with them. Dizzy broke down, tears spilling like rain. Tonka didn't speak, not a word. June tore pages from her sketchbook and scattered them like ashes on the wind. Raina lit a candle for her brother, her voice barely a whisper. "We don't last. We just exist." After that night, the crew began to unravel. The cracks grew wider. Ash and Lucian slipped away before the rest fell apart completely. But that brief, flickering time, under that crumbling overpass with other lost kids, stayed with them. Proof that even monsters could belong, if only for a little while. Chapter 12. Winter came early that year, sharp and sudden like a slap in the face. They took shelter in an abandoned laundromat on the edge of the city. Its cracked windows rattled with the cold wind, and the tile floor felt as unforgiving as bone beneath their bare feet. But somehow, the ancient dryers still hummed to life if you kicked them just right. Ash had scavenged some copper wire from a construction site and rigged an old space heater. The coils buzzing weakly, but enough to chase the worst chill away. Lucian had found a heap of discarded clothes shoved behind a dumpster, threadbare but layered, enough to fend off frostbite for a while. It wasn't much, not really, but it was something they could call home. One night, the door creaked open. A girl stepped inside, her face pale, bruised, a split lip swollen and raw. Her arm was marked with cigarette burns, the kind of scars that never fully heal. Her name was Maribel. Ash's first instinct was to say no, but Lucian didn't hesitate. He let her in. She didn't say much at first. She ate the scraps they offered quietly, slept close to the heat without complaint, watched them both with eyes that were sharp, wary, like she was constantly calculating if she could trust them or if she should run. Over time, though, she began to open up. Her story spilled out in fragments, passed between foster homes that smelled like bleach and lost hope, a group home with locked doors and sermons blaring from speakers late into the night. She didn't ask about Lucian's pale skin or the way Ash's body jerked and twitched when the moon crept high. Maybe she already knew. Maybe she was broken enough not to care. For a little while, the three of them found a fragile rhythm. Ash kept to the edges, always watchful. Lucian lit candles every night, their flickering flames casting dancing shadows against the cracked walls. He played cassette lullabies he'd found in a thrift store, old, scratchy melodies that somehow made the cold seem less cruel. Maribel filled the windows with drawings of birds, fragile wings drawn in the grime, as if those tiny sketches could carry them all away from the darkness. Sometimes, Lucian would wake, screaming, tangled in nightmares so vivid he couldn't tell dream from memory. Ash would hold him down, voice low and steady through clenched teeth. "You're okay. I've got you." Other times, Ash would come back from a blackout, hands stained with blood, shaking like he'd been clawing his way out of some nightmare. Lucian never asked, just cleaned him up, with quiet hands, and said nothing. Maribel never judged them. She just said, "We're all monsters for someone." But the cracks were deepening. Lucian's hunger sharpened like a blade honed on bone. He lost whole hours to the dark, returning dazed, lips stained a sickly red. Ash's anger boiled over in sharp, sudden bursts. One night, he smashed a car window just for the sound, the jagged crash echoing through the empty street like a scream. They were changing, breaking down, losing the fight to hold on to what was left of their humanity. And then the full moon rose again, fat and red in the sky. Ash didn't wake in the laundromat. He woke alone in the snow, naked, cold, and empty. Lucian was crouched a few feet away, eyes wild and haunted. His mouth was smeared with something dark, something Ash didn't want to name, and Maribel was gone. They searched for days. The city held its breath. No note, no trace, no body, just silence. Lucian cried in silence, no tears, just the trembling that rattled his whole body. Ash didn't speak for 3 days. Then, when the weight of everything finally cracked him open, he whispered, hoarse and broken, "She saw us, and she ran. I would have too. That winter, they stopped pretending. They were monsters. Who still wanted love, who still tried, despite everything. And maybe that made it hurt even more, because even monsters deserve a chance at something better." Chapter 13. They stopped talking for a while, not out of anger, not even out of fear, just silence. Like the words had run out. Like nothing either of them could say would be big enough to carry the guilt they were dragging behind them. The laundromat grew colder. Lucian stopped lighting the candles Ash had stolen from a church basement. Ash stopped fixing the cracked tiles and the busted dryer he used to pretend was a project. They just let things rot. Sometimes they slept. Sometimes they didn't. When they did, it was in fits, twitching, sweating, muscles knotting from half-remembered nightmares. Lucian, once a flickering spark of biting jokes and stubborn defiance, went quiet, but not calm. Never calm. He was a wire pulled tight, humming with tension. A boy-shaped grenade, waiting for the pin to slip. Ash, on the other hand, paced. At night, when the city quieted and the air turned metallic with cold, he couldn't sit still. His hands trembled with something hot and mean just under the skin. It wasn't just the wolf anymore. It was him, Ash. He wanted to punch walls. He wanted to howl. He wanted something to bleed so he could feel real again. One morning, Lucian came back late. The sun had barely started clawing its way up over the rooftops. Ash had been sitting on the floor with a busted chair leg in his lap, turning it over and over like it might tell him something. Lucian's hoodie was stained. Not with food, not with dirt. Ash didn't ask at first, didn't need to. Lucian just stood in the doorway, eyes low, voice hoarse. I didn't mean to. Ash wanted, needed, to believe him, to reach across the distance and pull him back before he slipped too far. But then he saw it, the slow drip of red sliding off Lucian's fingers, dotting the tile floor like punctuation marks in a language they didn't want to learn. Ash's voice came out flat. Was it someone? Lucian didn't answer. His lip trembled, his eyes filled with something that might have been tears, or just the aftershock of hunger. I think so, he whispered. Later, Ash punched one of the steel support beams in the back room. He hit it again and again, knuckles splitting, skin peeling back in raw streaks. Not because it helped, not because it solved anything, but because the pain made things feel solid. He felt real, and somehow that was scarier than feeling like a monster. Then came the night of the fire. Ash woke up coughing. The air was thick, bitter, burning his throat, coating his lungs. Flames licked up the walls of the laundromat like greedy hands. The ceiling groaned. Plastic melted in oozing rivers. Lucian was already standing there, barefoot in the middle of it, illuminated by flickering orange and black smoke. His mouth was cut, his hoodie scorched, his eyes glowed faintly, like embers. There was something broken and dazed in his expression. I thought maybe it would purify us, he said. His voice was thin, brittle, like glass just before it shatters. Ash didn't think. He tackled him, dragged him out, the both of them choking and coughing, stumbling into the alley like ghosts clawing their way out of hell. They sat across the street in the snow, watching the flames devour what had once been a home. Lucian leaned against Ash, head on his shoulder. His body was shaking, not from the cold, but from something deeper. I don't want to be like this anymore, he whispered. Ash didn't respond, because he didn't know how. After that, they stopped staying anywhere for long. They drifted, like smoke from the fire, like the echo of people they used to be. Back alleys, tunnel systems, abandoned parks and empty playgrounds, long after midnight. Lucian grew colder, hungrier. His eyes stayed lead longer. His hands stayed blood-stained longer. His smiles, when they came, were sharp around the edges. Ash started locking himself up during full moons, wherever he could. Dumpsters, janitor closets. Once, in a public restroom where he tied his belt around his wrists and fastened it to the sink pipe. It didn't always work. The wolf found cracks. The boy beneath it started to slip away. They were losing, not just to the blood, not just to the claw. They were losing to grief. Grief for people like Maribel, like Mags. Grief for the kids under the bridge they couldn't save. Grief for themselves. The versions of them that once believed in something better, something human. Ash stared at Lucian sometimes and didn't recognize him. Lucian stared into cracked mirrors and saw nothing at all. And then one night, it happened. A man, uniformed, loud, flashing his badge like a shield, shook Lucian awake in a transit hallway. Maybe he thought he was being helpful. Maybe he thought Lucian was just another lost kid in need of discipline. But Lucian wasn't asleep. Not really. He was dreaming, hungry, half submerged in a place where sunlight couldn't reach. The flashlight hit his eyes. The badge flashed. The man's hand gripped his shoulder. Lucian didn't stop himself in time. He didn't even try.
Chapter 14. The man with the flashlight didn't die, but he should have. Lucian had been curled on a subway grate, barely conscious. His hoodie was pulled tight over his face, breath fogging in the frigid air, bones humming with hunger. The kind that didn't come from his stomach, but from somewhere deeper, older. Ash had gone above ground to chase rats, desperate for meat, for marrow, for anything that didn't have a name or a soul. He was gone for minutes, maybe 15, maybe 10, but that was long enough. The man, a transit cop, bored and underpaid, with a belt full of petty authority and just enough bravado to think himself invincible, saw Lucian as just another vagrant kid, a trespasser, a stain in need of removal. He nudged him with a boot. Nothing. Then bent down and grabbed Lucian's shoulder. That was his mistake. Lucian's eyes snapped open, wide and blazing, irises ringed in molten gold and crimson. Hunger poured off him like steam. He didn't think, didn't speak, didn't see. He bit. Fangs sunk deep into the man's neck before the flashlight even hit the floor. The scream that followed was high, broken, choked off too fast. Ash returned at a sprint, blood on his lips and a dead rat in his fist. He saw the cop slumped on the tiles. Lucian crouched over him, breathing hard, blood slicking his chin and dripping onto the concrete in slow, steady drops. Ash dropped the rat. Lucian! Lucian flinched. The spell broke. His gaze cleared briefly, just enough to let Ash pull him back. Just enough for Lucian to stumble to the wall and stare at his hams in horror. Then at the man, unconscious but alive, gasping wet breaths through the puncture wounds in his throat. They didn't stay to explain. The man lived, but he never forgot. Not the boy with the hollow eyes, not the smell of blood, not the cold fingers digging into his flesh like talons from a nightmare. After that, there were whispers. Among the homeless, the runaways, the junkies and night dwellers, monsters, they said. Kids who weren't really kids. Eyes that glowed in the dark, teeth too sharp, growls in the tunnels. The papers called them a feral youth gang. Police patrols doubled in the subway system. Ash and Lucian vanished underground, deeper, into forgotten storm drains and condemned boiler rooms, where rats outnumbered people and the air smelled like rust and rot. Lucian began sleeping in bursts. He'd wake with blood under his fingernails and no memory of how it got there. Sometimes he cried, sometimes he didn't. Ash, meanwhile, was changing too. The wolf inside was no longer content to sleep. It paced, snarling beneath his skin. His fingernails thickened. His bones ached before the full moon, like something ancient grinding its way free of its cage. He tried to hold on. He tried. Then one night, they heard it. A scream. High, thin, choked by terror. They were under the broken foundation of a dead mall, once bright and buzzing, now a mausoleum of shattered glass and graffiti-tagged dreams. Lucian stopped mid-step. Ash froze beside him. The smell hit first. Fear. Real fear. Young. Innocent. They didn't speak. They ran. It came from a maintenance shed behind the mall, barely held together with rusted sheet metal and zip ties. Inside, a single bulb flickered overhead. A man in a uniform loomed in the corner, belt unbuckled. Shirt stained, eyes wild. He smelled like beer and old rage. And in the far corner, a girl, maybe 8, duct tape over her mouth, wrists bound, shirt torn. Ash's body moved, but Lucian's moved faster. There was no hesitation this time, no plea for a reason, no guilt in his face, only clarity. He slammed into the man with preternatural speed, teeth flashing. The scream that followed was short, sudden, final. Blood splattered the walls. The bulb above swung wildly, casting shadows like blades across the concrete. When it was over, Lucian stood still, chest heaving, eyes glowing. His face was a mask of calm, a monster's peace. Ash stared at him, silent, unsure who he was anymore. Lucian turned, not to Ash, to the girl. She hadn't moved, still trembling, frozen like a bird who hadn't yet realized the hawk was gone. Lucian knelt beside her and gently peeled the tape from her mouth. His hands were still bloody, his fangs still visible, but his voice soft,
"You're safe now," he whispered. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She just looked at them, these two blood-stained boys in torn clothes, and asked, "Are you angels?" Lucian blinked. Then, for the first time in a long while, he smiled. Ash couldn't answer. His throat felt full of broken glass. They were gone before the sirens came. The news ran the story under bold headlines. Unidentified youths save girl from predator. Mystery vigilantes strike in abandoned mall. Is this divine justice? The man was a repeat offender, a convicted predator out on early release. No one mourned him. The public called it heroic, miraculous, divine intervention. Ash knew better. It wasn't angels. It wasn't justice. It was a monster with blood on his lips who chose to save someone instead of feeding. And maybe, just maybe, that meant something. Even if it cost them their souls. Even if the world still called them monsters. They were monsters. But not only that. Not tonight. Not yet. Chapter 15. They walked for miles after. No words, no direction, just the rhythm of footsteps crunching through new-fallen snow. Soft and steady, like a heartbeat, trying to stay calm. Ash kept close, a step behind, glancing sideways every few yards. He half expected Lucian to crumble, to vomit, to cry, to shake with the weight of what he'd done. But Lucian didn't shake. If anything, he looked peaceful. Blood clung to his hoodie like rusted ink, already drying in stiff patches across the fabric. Snowflakes landed on it and melted instantly, disappearing into the warmth of the violence that still clung to him. Ash swallowed hard. The silence stretched until it hurt. Then finally, "You didn't even flinch," Ash said, voice low, breaking like ice under pressure. Lucian didn't look at him, just kept walking, breathing slowly, steadily. "He deserved it," he said softly. Ash's jaw tightened. "That's not the point." Lucian's eyes flicked toward him. Flat, calm, ancient. "Isn't it?" Ash stopped in the snow, fists clenched at his sides, breathing hard. The cold didn't bite him anymore. Nothing did. Not when the wolf was so close to the surface. "I'm trying to keep us from becoming monsters," he said. "And you?" Lucian turned. The look on his face was terrifying, not because it was angry, but because it wasn't. His voice was quiet, measured, almost gentle. "We are monsters, Ash. You're just better at lying to yourself about it." The words landed like razors, small, precise, devastating. Ash wanted to scream, to punch a wall, to shift and run until his legs gave out. But instead, he just stood there, snow melting against his skin. And the worst part? He didn't disagree. They found shelter in the back of a shuttered bakery on a dead-end street. The sign out front had lost half its letters. Rankies du NTS, swinging in the wind, groaning with every gust. Inside, it smelled like the ghost of something sweet. Flour, burnt sugar, memories of warmth that didn't belong to them. Ash helped Lucian down onto an old quilt someone had left behind. Probably one of the many homeless who'd passed through before them. The oven in the back room still radiated the last bit of heat from the pipes beneath. Lucian didn't say a word. He curled up next to it, pulled his hood tight over his head, and drifted off within minutes, his breathing soft and even, as if the world hadn't shifted under their feet. Ash sat across from him, knees pulled to his chest, watching him sleep. In the half-dark, Lucian looked like a kid again, a real one. Not a creature of blood and silence, just a boy who should have had a bed. A parent, a life, something safe. But then Lucian twitched in his sleep, and his lips parted, and Ash saw the glint of fangs catching the light. The illusion shattered. Ash didn't sleep. He couldn't. Instead, he cleaned Lucian's clothes as best he could, scrubbing them in a cracked sink with boiled water and a bar of soap he found under the counter. His hands stung. He didn't care. He wrapped them both in an old blanket that smelled like dust and cinnamon. He watched the snow pile higher against the windows, listened to the wind rattle the glass, and thought about that little girl's voice in the alleyway. Are you angels? He'd wanted to believe it then, that maybe they were doing something good, that killing the man who hurt her wasn't just vengeance, it was justice. But now, looking at the blood on his hands and the monster beside him, he didn't feel like an angel, didn't even feel like a person. Still, maybe, just maybe, doing something good, even by accident, was better than doing nothing at all. Maybe that one moment of safety they'd given her would mean something. Ash held on to that thought like a lifeline. Because the moon was rising, and he could already feel the wolf, pacing, circling, pressing against his ribs like a second heartbeat. Tomorrow, it might all fall apart again. But tonight, he sat in the silence, staring into the shadows, waiting for morning, and wondering how many more pieces of himself he could lose before there was nothing left but teeth. Chapter 16. Lucian had stopped flinching at sirens. He didn't duck behind dumpsters or slip into shadows when blue lights flashed down cracked streets. He didn't scan rooftops for helicopters or hold his breath when patrols rolled by. There was a steadiness in him now, not arrogance, not cruelty, just certainty. It was the kind of stillness that made Ash nervous, like a still lake before it froze over. He watched Lucian from across rooms now, wondering what was shifting beneath that quiet. There used to be a tremble in Lucian's hands, a fragility in his voice when the hunger came. That was gone. Now there was only patience, cold, coiled patience. Ash had seen weeds break through concrete before. He knew what roots could do if you left them long enough. They were squatting in an abandoned community center, 4 blocks from where they used to sleep. The building still had the skeleton of something hopeful. Posters for dance classes and ESL nights curled on the bulletin boards, water-damaged and forgotten. One wall had a mural of children, smiling, holding balloons, painted in bright, naive colors. The fire had taken half of it. Their faces melted into smoke. Only their eyes remained. Ash had rigged the door with bells he found in a crafts bin, tied them with string to the knob. It was all he could do to feel a sliver of safety, a warning system if someone came. Lucian didn't care. He found an old upright piano in the back room. It was out of tune. Most of the keys were broken, all but one, a low, dead-sounding C. He pressed it sometimes, over and over, soft, slow, like a heartbeat fading away. Ash nearly ripped the thing apart after the first week. The note haunted him at night, that sound and the silence between each press. The wolf had started speaking, not with words, with urges, with hunger, with the kind of need that blurred the edges of thought. Ash would wake in the middle of the night, drenched in cold sweat, jaws sore from grinding his teeth, every muscle tight like they'd just snapped back from running miles. He'd feel the ghost of claws in his fingers, taste copper in his mouth. Something inside him was stretching, changing. It wasn't just the moon anymore. The beast wanted out, always. He took to restraining himself again. Bike chains, duct tape, rope, an old extension cord wrapped around his wrists like a failed prayer. It didn't always work. Once, he woke to find a dead dog at his feet. It wasn't mangled. It wasn't even messy. Just its throat torn clean. Still warm. Ash wept, but not from guilt. He wept because it had felt right. Good, true. And he hated that part of himself. The part that felt peace in violence. Lucian noticed. "You're scared of yourself now," he said one morning, sitting cross-legged on the floor, tracing slow circles in the dust with a finger. His nails were longer now, sharper. Ash didn't look at him. "I'm scared of what I'll do to you." Lucian didn't answer, didn't offer comfort, but he didn't come closer either. That silence was worse than any scream. One day, Lucian disappeared, just gone. No note, no warning. Ash waited an hour, then 3. Then the sun started to set. He tore through the neighborhood like a storm, howling under his breath, fingers twitching, eyes already gold. He nearly shifted twice. His body wanted the excuse. The wolf wanted to search the rooftops, to chase, to find whoever had taken Lucian. But no one had. Lucian returned at dusk, calm, steady, holding a bag of food, proper food, hot and greasy and steaming in the cold, and a coat. Warm, clean, still smelling of someone else.
Ash's eyes narrowed. You stole it, he said flatly. Lucian nodded. Yeah. You kill anyone? Lucian met his gaze. No. Ash didn't believe him. Not entirely.
Lucian must have seen it in his face. I didn't kill anyone, he said again. I'm learning control.
Ash scoffed. Since when? Lucian shrugged, pulling the coat tighter around his thin frame.
Since I realized power doesn't have to mean cruelty. Ash said nothing, but the hair on the back of his neck stood up, because Lucian meant it, because Lucian was starting to sound like one of them, the old ones, the purebloods, the kind of vampires that could peel a soul apart with a smile and still think themselves merciful. They were dristing, not in a dramatic, movie-ending kind of way, not with shouting matches or slamming doors, just inch by inch, shift by shift. Lucian wasn't the same boy who had cried beside him in the alley that first night, and Ash wasn't the same boy who had pulled him behind dumpsters and told him to run. They were still side by side, still sharing space, still surviving, but the silence between them had grown teeth. And the scariest part? Neither of them wanted to say it out loud, because saying it would make it real. And once it was real, it might never go back to what it was. Chapter 17. They met Sister June on a Tuesday. It was raining, the kind of rain that made the streets steam and the gutters overflow with city rot. Ash and Lucian were curled behind a generator near an old freight depot, soaked to the bone, skin pale, teeth chattering in rhythm with distant thunder. The church she came from barely looked like one. A rusted steeple leaned like a crooked finger over the industrial district, half its stained glass missing. Crucifix chipped and tired. There was no congregation, just a soup kitchen that opened late for those the world left behind. She didn't ask them what they were, didn't ask them why a boy with glowing eyes wouldn't meet her gaze, or why the other growled like a cornered animal. She just brought blankets, thick ones, dry, and soup, and a flashlight, cheap plastic with weak batteries, which she left behind on purpose. Ash didn't trust her. Lucian didn't not trust her. They returned the next night, and the night after that. Sister June didn't hover. She didn't preach. She moved like a woman who had seen too much to flinch anymore. Her hands were calloused from decades of labor, her voice low and steady. She wore denim skirts and orthopedic shoes, and a wooden cross that hung heavy on her chest like armor. She didn't ask questions. She gave tasks. Ash fixed a broken pipe in the basement, cursing under his breath the whole time. Lucian swept the nays and dusted pews with silent precision. They weren't chores. They were a language, and Sister June understood it. She taught them how to cook without speaking, showed them where the coffee was kept, hummed old hymns while peeling carrots as if the world hadn't broken her heart long ago. She treated them like boys, like people. She let them sleep in the choir loft, high above the nave, in an old patchwork of blankets and coats. For the first time in months, Ash didn't wake up snarling. For the first time in forever, Lucian didn't dream of blood. But the moon was coming. Ash felt it in his bones, in the burn behind his eyes, in the itch beneath his fingernails, in the way every heartbeat he heard felt like thunder in his ears. He didn't want to risk it, didn't want to risk her, so he ran. Into the woods behind the city, deeper than before. He found a rusted chain and handcuffs someone had abandoned near a junked-out shack. Wrapped them around an old pine tree and locked himself there. When night came, the wolf wouldn't be denied. Lucian found him just before dusk, crouching nearby like a shadow. You can't keep doing this, he said quietly. Ash's voice was already trembling. I'll kill her, he whispered. I'll kill you. Lucian didn't flinch. Then let me stay. Ash snarled, panic rising. If I smell blood, if I see red, I won't know you. Lucian leaned closer, his eyes dark, his voice steady. Then remember me. It didn't work. The cuffs broke, the wire tore into bark, and the wolf came. When Ash woke, he was alone, naked, curled in a patch of shredded leaves and torn earth. Trees were snapped in half like matchsticks. A flock of birds lay broken and scattered, wings twisted unnaturally. Blood. His mouth tasted of it. His hands were caked in it. He couldn't breathe. Then he saw him, Lucian, perched high in a tree, crouched on a branch like some patient spirit. His shirt was ripped, his lips split open, one eye swollen shut. Scratches ran down his arms, one still bleeding sluggishly. But he was alive. Ash broke, collapsed into the dirt, sobbing into the dead leaves, shoulders shaking as if the world had finally caved in. Lucian stayed in the tree until it passed, until Ash remembered how to breathe again. When they returned to the church, dawn was bleeding into the city like a bruise. The front doors were open, lights still flickering. But something was wrong. The air inside was too still. The kitchen smelled like blood and burned onions. They found a smear of red across the tiles, a broken chair, Sister June's rosary tangled in a puddle of soup. No body, no scream, just absence. Lucian crouched by the stain, nostrils flaring. She tried to stop someone, he said. They took her. Ash stood in the center of the nave, fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. His eyes were wide, empty. She's gone, he said softly. Lucian nodded, expression unreadable. Because of us. Ash didn't deny it. The wolf had come, and it hadn't just destroyed trees. It had ruined hope again. Chapter 18. They didn't speak for hours. They walked through burned-out streets and hollowed alleys where the city choked on its own neon and filth. No destination, just momentum. Lucian moved like a shadow with purpose, following the scent like a knife through fog. Blood, motor oil, cigarette ash, cheap leather soaked in cruelty. Ash trailed beside him, fists clenched, jaw tight. The wolf was pacing beneath his skin, just under the surface, snarling at every siren, every flickering light. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was dangerous. By the time they reached the warehouse, the sky was the color of rusted metal. The van was parked around the back. Same dented bumper, same shattered tail light, blacked out windows, a rust-colored steel door, swollen with rain and rot. Lucian's eyes caught the dark and glowed faint gold. They're still inside. Ash cracked his knuckles. The sound echoed like a match being struck. Good. Inside. The men were laughing. 4 of them, big, ugly, scarred. The kind of laughter that meant nothing ever touched them. Not guilt, not pain, not consequence. One had Sister June's cross around his thick neck, her delicate silver chain twisted into a mockery. Lucian saw it first. His face didn't change. He just moved, silent, swift, a blur between shadows and breath. Before the first man even stood up, Lucian was there, his hand on the back of the man's head, his fangs punching through the artery like they belonged there. No struggle, no sound, just precision and blood. The others shouted, half drunk and slower than they should have been. Ash was already moving. The second man barely had time to raise a bottle before Ash collided with him like a freight train. No shift, not fully, just enough. Claws where fingers should be, jaws wide and hungry. He didn't kill the man, he destroyed him. Tore through meat and cartilage with the raw violence of something that didn't know what mercy was. The wolf took over and loved it. The third man ran. Lucian let him, for 3 steps. Then came the blade, stolen weeks ago, small and silent. It found its mark low in the back, angled cruelly upward. The man collapsed, screaming into the concrete. Lucian walked up, slow, eyes empty. He didn't feed, he just watched. Ash stood over his own kill, panting, blood running down his arms. He looked at Lucian and saw something colder than the night. Lucian had held back, not out of mercy, but to feel it all, to remember every second. When it was over, the warehouse was painted in blood and something worse. The air smelled like metal, smoke, and regret. Ash stepped over a body and found Sister June's coat, ripped, burned at the edges, left like an afterthought. No body, no sign of her, just fabric and absence. Lucian knelt by a metal desk and pried open a drawer. Inside was a ledger, names, photos, descriptions, locations. It wasn't just them. There were dozens, maybe more. Children, teens, runaways, forgotten ones. Ash stared at it, rage curdling in his gut. This wasn't justice, he said. It was rage. Lucian stood slowly, wiping blood from his jaw with the back of his hand. His eyes were glassy, not with tears, with clarity. Sometimes, Lucian said quietly, there's no difference. Ash turned to him, disgust and grief twisting his voice. That's not who we were supposed to be. Lucian met his gaze, calm, empty. That's exactly who we were always going to be. Something cracked then. Not a bone, not the floor, the space between them. Ash looked at Lucian, really looked, and didn't see a boy. Not anymore. Not his friend, not his brother. He saw something ancient waking up behind Lucian's eyes. Something that didn't bleed for the dead anymore. Something that had stopped pretending to be human.
And Lucian looked at Ash, shoulders hunched, breath sharp, hands still twitching with the wolf's hunger, and wondered how long he had before the creature inside that body turned on him too. They left the warehouse, together, but not with each other, and the night, for the first time, felt unrecoverable. Chapter 19. They stopped speaking, not out of anger, not exactly. It was something colder, quieter, like an old wound finally giving up the fight to heal. Lucian wondered at night. Ash wondered during the day. They stopped sleeping in the same place. Lucian began feeding again. Not often, not violently, but freely. Ash caught the scent more than once. Copper and warmth and sin. Lucian didn't hide it. Ash didn't ask. They were coexisting, like ghosts. One night, Ash found Lucian watching a child from a rooftop, a boy no older than them, playing in the street with a broken soccer ball. Lucian's eyes were sharp, focused. Ash grabbed him by the collar and yanked him back. Lucian didn't flinch. Don't, Ash growled. Lucian blinked. I wasn't going to. I was just remembering. Remembering what? Lucian shrugged. What it was like to feel warm, to be small, to not want anything more than a game. Ash let him go and then shoved him, hard. You're slipping, Ash snapped. Bit by bit. Lucian's expression stayed calm. So are you. Ash snarled, fists trembling. I'm fighting it. Lucian leaned in. You're losing. The first punch came fast. Ash threw it. Lucian didn't dodge. It cracked across his cheek, and for a second, Ash felt shame. Then Lucian smiled, blood on his lip, and lunged. They fought like creatures, not boys. Claws against teeth, snarls and howls and shrieks. No words, just hurt. Ash slammed Lucian into a wall so hard it cracked. Lucian raked his nails across Ash's chest, drawing blood. Ash tried to hold back the wolf. Lucian didn't hold back anything. At one point, Ash pinned Lucian to the ground, hand at his throat, breathing heavy, heart breaking. Lucian looked up at him, unblinking. I'm not your burden, he whispered. Ash's grip loosened. Lucian shoved him off and disappeared into the shadows. Ash sat there, chest heaving, blood dripping into the dirt. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just stared at the space where his only friend had been. And for the first time in a long time, he felt truly alone. Chapter 20. Lucian. He hadn't fed in days, not properly, not the way the hunger needed. He chewed through a bag of stolen plasma once, lukewarm and metallic, like sucking rust through a straw. It did nothing. The ache was still there. The hunger gnawed now, not just at his stomach, but at his thoughts, his sense of self. It scraped his memory raw. He could barely recall who he had been, what he thought he wanted to be. He wandered through alleyways like a revenant in torn denim and silence, passing through crowds like smoke. The city stretched around him in broken neon and concrete heat, too loud, too bright. Faces smiled, voices laughed. He hated all of it. He found himself outside a nightclub, not one for kids, velvet rope, red light, a line of men in gold watches and women in sharp heels. Lucian didn't belong, but he didn't care. The bouncer looked right through him, pupils wide, skin damp. Lucian brushed his mind like dust off a coat. The man blinked and stepped aside. The trick was getting easier. Too easy. He didn't feed that night, but he thought about it, harder than ever before. He stood in the shadows of the club,
surrounded by sweating bodies and pounding bass, and let the scent of blood and perfume and want wrap around him like a second skin. And when he left, his fangs had pierced his own lip, just to taste something. Ash, he woke up in a junkyard, naked, cold, covered in blood that wasn't his. He sat up fast, heartbeat thundering, rusted metal bit into his back, bottles crunched beneath him. He looked down at his hands, stained brown red and shaking, at the slashes down his legs, at the bruises forming across his ribs. He didn't remember getting there, didn't remember what he'd done. A rabbit? A dog? A person? The thought made him gag. He staggered to his feet, weaving between towers of broken cars and stripped engines. The morning sun weak and grey above the wreckage. His body hurt all over, not like injuries, but like rejection, like something inside was trying to claw its way out and wear him like skin. The transformations were getting worse, uncontrolled, uncalled. The wolf used to wait for the full moon. It used to ask. Now it demanded. Ash couldn't remember the last time he'd felt human. The wolf didn't want a moon. The wolf wanted a reason, and Ash kept giving it one. Lucian. He found a girl. She was sleeping across plastic seats on the subway. Legs curled, arms wrapped tight around a stuffed rabbit with one ear missing. Maybe 17, maybe younger. Bruises on her neck and track marks, then full conversations, arguing in dark alleys, laughing on rooftops, humming songs only Ash would know. Ash was always there in his head. He imagined what Ash would say when Lucian stood at the edge of a roof. Jump, you idiot. No, don't. Fight it. Let go. But the voice wasn't enough. The hallucinations couldn't warm him, couldn't slow the hunger, couldn't hold back the tide. Blood was all that worked now, and even that was starting to taste like ash. Ash, he returned to the warehouse, the one they'd burned down, where the monsters in priest robes and syringes had taken Sister June. The walls were black and cracked. The roof sagged like a broken spine. Ash stepped through the ruins like a ghost, sifting through soot and debris for something he didn't know how to name. A sign, a message, Lucian. He found a scorched scrap of cloth, half a rosary, one of his old shoes. He sat in the rubble for hours, silent. The silence said everything. He wasn't just losing Lucian anymore. He was losing himself. They were unraveling. Not just breaking apart, breaking open. And whatever came out of those cracks wouldn't be boys anymore. It would be something else, something dangerous, something hungry.
Chapter 21, Lucian. The girl found him sleeping on a rooftop mausoleum, a crumbling relic in the middle of a forgotten cemetery on the city's edge. Cold wind tugged at his hoodie. The marble beneath him was cracked, moss-covered. She stood above him, hands jammed into the pockets of her shredded bomber jacket. Greasy pink hair clung to her jawline. A scar curved across her cheek, like a question no one had dared to answer. "You're sleeping in my graveyard," she said. Lucian didn't flinch, didn't speak. His eyes remained half-lidded, unreadable. She tossed him a protein bar without ceremony, like she was feeding a stray. "I'm not gonna rob you. You don't got anything worth taking anyway." He caught the bar and bit into it like a machine. She crouched near the ledge, watching him the way predators did other predators, wary, interested, not afraid. "You ever kill someone?" she asked. Lucian met her eyes, didn't lie. "Yeah." She nodded. Like that was a password. "Cool, me too." Her name was Kit. She didn't need saving. She didn't beg for protection or demand explanation. That's what Lucian noticed first. What he didn't realize was that she was just as hungry as he was. Ash. The shelter stank of bleach, old socks, and lies. Ash didn't want trouble, but trouble came anyway. 3 older boys, the kind who carved power out of fear. They circled him behind the dining hall, all sharp grins and rotted teeth. They thought he smelled like prey. Ash didn't shift all the way. He didn't need to. The claws came first, just his fingers, lengthened, sharpened. Then his teeth. Not wolf, not human, something in between. Something that had no name but pain. When the boys hit the ground, howling and bleeding,
Ash looked up and saw the shelter director standing in the doorway. Her face was pale. "Get out," she whispered. "No second chance. No paperwork. Just exile." Ash ran until the shelter was a bad dream drowned in rain. He ran until his feet bled and the wolf in him stopped panting and went quiet again. Lucian and Kit. They moved like shadows now. Rooftops, tunnels, abandoned subway lines. Forgotten places for forgotten people. Kit didn't ask questions. Lucian didn't offer answers. She told him she was 12, maybe 13. Though she looked older some days, younger others. Her stories changed every time she spoke. Parents dead. Parents druggies. Parents rich assholes who sold her for a fix. Lucian never knew what was true. But the scar was real. Her blade was real. The hunger in her eyes, that was real too. She wasn't like June. She didn't flinch when Lucian fed off a man who tried to drag her behind a dumpster. She didn't scream when he tore out a throat or let his eyes turn red in front of her. If anything, she smiled more. "You're thirsty," she said one night, sitting beside him in a storm drain, lit only by the flicker of a trash fire. "So take it." Lucian wiped blood off his chin and didn't answer. Kit sighed. "Not from kids. Right, I get it. Still pretending to be noble." He stared into the flames. "I'm not pretending." She threw a rock into the dark water. "Then you're still lying. Just to yourself." Her words hit deeper than fangs. "Ash." The whispers started in the streets. Tales told by terrified dealers and half-mad junkies. A boy and a girl robbing crews in the tunnels. Ghosts with knives and eyes that glowed in the dark. Ash didn't believe it at first. Then he heard the description. The girl with the pink hair. The boy who never smiled. Lucian. It couldn't be. But he followed the trail anyway. Burned out encampments, stashes ransacked with surgical precision, blood patterns that didn't make sense. It felt like chasing a dream or a ghost he'd buried. The closer he got, the more the wolf stirred. Not angry, not eager, just longing. Collision. It happened behind a boarded-up rec center, in an alley that stank as piss and rot. Kit was on top of a man twice her size, switchblade flashing in the dark. She moved fast and low, jabs to the thigh, the gut, the neck, precision, practice. Lucian stood behind her, arms crossed, watching like it was a test he'd already taken and passed. Ash saw it all from the rooftop above. The moment slammed into him like a freight train. He dropped. His boots hit pavement with a crack of noise, drawing Lucian's eyes immediately. Kit spun, blades still dripping. Lucian froze. The color drained from his face. Ash stepped forward slowly, eyes locked on Lucian, like he couldn't believe he was real. Kit tilted her head. "Who the hell are?" Ash pushed her aside. Not hard, not gentle, just enough. Lucian's eyes flickered. "Ash." Ash's voice was hoarse, cracked like it had been screaming inside him for weeks. "I thought you were dead." Lucian didn't speak. Ash took another step. "I searched, for weeks. I thought I saw you, twice. And now you're just, this?" Kit raised the blade again, but Lucian caught her wrist. "Don't." Ash's eyes brimmed with something feral. "Come back. We can still fight it, like before." Lucian shook his head. "I'm tired, Ash. You gave up." "No, I let go." Ash's fists clenched. The wolf beneath his skin stirred, hungry, grieving. "We finish it," he growled. Lucian stepped forward. "Yeah, maybe we do." The alley went still. Kit's eyes flicked between them. Two monsters who used to be boys. Two boys who used to be everything to each other. And now, they were sparks in a powder keg. Waiting. Chapter 22. The alley was a graveyard of shadows, choking on silence. The moon hung overhead like an open wound, thin and merciless. Trash clung to the cracked concrete in wet piles, and the smell of rot tangled with blood already spilled. It was a place made for endings. Ash's wolf snarled deep in his throat. His bare feet dug into the filth-slick pavement, nails shifting, lengthening. His eyes blazed, not golden, but wild, haunted by fury and heartbreak. His breath came in broken gusts, steam rising from his skin in the frosty night air. Lucian stood across from him, lean and trembling, arms shaking at his sides. But his eyes, those were no longer soft. They burned with ancient fire, ruthless and hungry. His fangs had descended, but it wasn't just the thirst. It was surrender, a final, terrible release. Kit stood between them, her small body taut as a pulled wire, her heart pounding like it was trying to break free. "You don't have to do this," Ash growled, voice raw with grief. "We can fight it. We always fought it." Lucian's lip curled in something that wasn't quite a sneer, more sorrow than hate. "We've been fighting it our whole lives. What's left of us?" His voice cracked. "This is the only ending we deserve." "No," Kit cried, voice thin against the rising storm in their veins. "Please, stop." They lunged. There was no warning, no countdown, just blood. Ash moved like a bullet, fangs bared, claws ripping forward. Lucian collided with him mid-air, fingers sinking into his shoulders, mouth already aiming for the throat. The sound was obscene, flesh tearing, bones cracking, snarls and screams, and the wet suck of blood being taken by force. Kit screamed, covering her ears as their bodies crashed into the alley walls, as claws slashed and mouths tore. The street pulsed red with each beat of their hearts. This wasn't a fight. It was a ritual, a slow, savage act of mutual annihilation. Lucian sank his fangs deep into Ash's neck, drawing a fountain of blood. Ash howled, raking his claws across Lucian's chest, opening it like paper. But instead of pulling back, they drank, each from the other, not to feed, but to erase. They were killing each other with desperate gulps, killing themselves, tearing out their history in mouthfuls of blood. Ash stumbled, blood pouring from his mouth, his eyes already dulling. Lucian dropped with him, lips smeared with crimson, arms twitching violently as his body gave out. They collapsed into each other, arms still grappling, faces pressed so close they looked like they might kiss, if there were anything left in the world but pain. Kit dropped to her knees, her hands hovered above them, shaking. She couldn't tell where Ash ended and Lucian began. Their blood had mixed, pooling around them like the ink of a story too terrible to keep reading. Their chests heaved. Lucian coughed blood. Ash groaned low, his body shuddering. Then Lucian's trembling hand reached, fingers barely working, and touched Ash's face. Their eyes met, and for the first time in years, there was nothing monstrous left in them. Only sorrow, only love, only the weight of too much. "I'm sorry," Lucian whispered, breath catching. I couldn't stop." Ash blinked slowly, his lips parted as if to speak, but nothing came. His hand twitched once, then fell limp against the alley floor. Lucian's fingers slipped from his cheek. His eyes fluttered, rolled back, and closed. Both boys lay still, blood leaking from them in slow, final rivers. Kit let out a strangled sob as she crawled to their sides. "No, please," she whispered. Her voice was barely sound anymore. It was breath and wind and gleef. "Please don't go." She pressed her hands to their chests, but there was no pulse, no warmth. Just wet cloth and broken ribs beneath. She collapsed fully, forehead against Lucian's shoulder, her body folding into the awful stillness. Rain began to fall, cold, dirty water trickling through the cracks above, washing down the sides of the buildings and cutting rivulets through the blood. No cars passed, no voices shouted. The city kept breathing, indifferent and massive, and in that narrow strip of the world, tucked between dumpsters and bricks, 2 boys died, holding each other. Kit didn't scream again. She didn't cry. She just stayed there, curled between them, her small frame shaking with silence. Because there were no words left, only the soft sound of rain on concrete, and the hole inside her that would never ever close. Epilogue. Something new. The scars didn't heal right. 3 long jagged wounds slashed across Kit's ribs. Ash's claws, drawn in blind rage during the final moments of the fight. He hadn't meant it, she knew that. But meaning didn't matter when blood had already been spilled. When love was gasping its last breath in a pool of moonlight and alley filth. Lucian had fed on her too, not as a monster, as a boy desperate to live. He was half-conscious, starved, fading fast, and Kit, bleeding, shaking, crying, had pressed her wrist to his mouth like a prayer. Just enough, she thought, just enough to keep him breathing. But it was enough for something more. She held them both as they died. Ash, convulsing in fury and guilt. Lucian, whimpering in pain and hunger. And her, in the middle, helpless, human, holding together a world cracking apart. Their blood was on her hands, under her fingernails, inside her. When it was over, the alley was silent, except for her heartbeat. And it wasn't quite human anymore. 3 nights later, Kit woke up screaming. She didn't remember falling asleep. She remembered the cold, hunger, trembling in a crawl space beneath a half-burned church, then blackness, and now, pain. Her body burned like it was being reshaped from the inside. Her breath steamed in the summer heat. Her heartbeat rattled against her ribs like a caged animal. Her hands twitched and flexed and shifted. Her fingernails cracked and regrew sharp, curved, wrong. She stumbled to a broken mirror. What stared back wasn't Kit. Her eyes were gold. Not warm, but metallic, glowing, almost inhuman. Her pupils weren't round anymore. Her mouth trembled open, and she saw the fangs. Not Lucian's elegant vampire teeth, but something jagged, lupine, mismatched. 2 instincts howled in her chest. One was cold and coiled, a thirst that cooed with silk promises of stillness and control. The other was wild and boiling. Blood and fur and hunt. She clutched her chest and sobbed. What am I? She was both, and neither. A new thing, born of grief and blood and love. Lucian's blood still sang in her veins, cooling her thoughts into craving. Ash's fury pulsed under her skin, clawing at her bones, begging to run. 2 boys, 2 curses. Each had marked her, each had loved her. And now they lived on through her, but distorted, fused. A hybrid child of moonlight and shadow. She was no longer just a girl. She was a nocturne. Kit disappeared from the world for a while. She didn't speak, didn't eat, barely breathed. She wandered the city like a ghost, sleeping in vents, tunnels, beneath loading docks, afraid of herself, of what she might do. But the dreams found her again. Not hers, others, street kids, just like her. The ones nobody sees. The ones with bruises shaped like boots. The ones who run and never stop running. She could smell their fear now. Hear the cries they didn't make out loud. Their hearts beat in her dreams like drums, and something inside her howled. She remembered being powerless, being small, being kicked, spat on, forgotten. She remembered what Ash did to protect Lucian, what Lucian sacrificed for love, what she failed to stop, and she stopped running. They say there's a girl in the alleyways now, a girl with glowing gold eyes and a whisper like winter. They say she doesn't talk to anyone, but watches from shadows. That she ripped out a pimp's throat behind a bus terminal and vanished into the fog. That she bled a crooked cop drama in a parking garage and left no trace. That she drinks blood, but only from monsters. That she moves like smoke and strikes like a storm. Sometimes, when the moon is high, she howls. Some call her Night Girl. Lucira, a name murmured among distraught children and fearful escapees, was spoken of in hushed tones, almost mythical. Some say she's a myth. Others say she's the reason a few kids are still alive. She never gives her name, because Kit is dead. But she remembers. She remembers Lucian's soft laughter as he looked up at the stars. She remembers Ash's growl that turned to laughter only when Lucian was safe. She remembers their arms around her, their blood on her hands, their love twisted and broken and real, and that is enough to keep her going.